I walked into my daughter's backyard with a dish of peach cobbler still warm from the oven. I thought I was early. I wasn't supposed to hear anything private. But then I heard her voice, clear, sharp, laughing just enough to make it sting. Honestly, why is she even still alive? The laugh that followed wasn't loud, just confident. The kind of laugh that told me this wasn't a joke she felt guilty about. My fingers tightened around the glass dish, but I didn't leave. I walked in like nothing happened. The yard was filled with folding chairs, picnic tables, and people pretending to be close. Lisa stood near the grill with a drink, her husband Mark by her side, both dressed like they'd come straight from a magazine shoot about people who never age. A few neighbours were there too, the kind who like to remind you they've known Lisa since high school. No one turned when I came through the gate. No one said, "Hi, Mom." I had baked that cobbler like it was an invitation back into their world. I carried it through the noise, the smell of burgers, and the music thumping from a Bluetooth speaker that sounded like a headache. "Mom, you came!" Lisa said, smiling in that tight, social way people smile when they don't mean it. "You didn't have to bring anything," I said. "I know." She laughed again, short and nervous, and went back to her friends. I set the dish down on the table, between a store-bought potato salad and a bottle of wine no one would share with me. For a while, I just sat there listening. The kids ran past me, my grandkids, without stopping. One nearly knocked into me. "Watch it," Lisa snapped at him, but not for my sake, just because it looked bad. Mark, my son-in-law, raised a glass and said, "To family." Everyone clinked glasses. Not a single one turned toward me. I used to be the kind of person who filled silences. Asked how everyone was doing. Made sure everyone ate. That day, I didn't ask a thing. I just watched them, like a stranger studying a documentary about her own extinction. Halfway through the party, Lisa walked over. "Do you want a plate, Mom?" she asked, voice sweet enough to rot a tooth. "I'm fine," I said. She nodded too fast, like she couldn't wait to get away. Later, when people started cleaning up, I helped anyway. Old habits die hard. I stacked paper plates, wiped down sticky tables, and folded napkins. No one thanked me. No one even noticed. When I finally left, the sun was low. I carried the empty dish like it was evidence. Not of what they said, but of what they didn't. At home, I washed it, dried it, and put it back in the cabinet. Everything around me looked exactly the same, but nothing felt familiar anymore. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the space across from me. I used to sit there with Lisa after school, back when she thought I knew everything. She'd tell me about boys, teachers, plans. I'd listen, proud and terrified at the same time. That girl was gone. I made coffee in my smallest pot, just 1 cup, and watched the steam curl up like it was trying to leave too. The silence in the house didn't feel lonely. It felt clean. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept hearing her voice. Why is she even still alive? I wondered if she said it because she was angry, or because she meant it. Both hurt the same. The next morning, I walked through the house and saw everything I'd ever given her. The couch I helped her buy, the money from my retirement account that became her down payment, the wedding photos I paid to frame. Every piece of my generosity sat there quietly, reminding me how easy it was to give everything to someone who stopped looking at you as a person. When the mail came, there was another bill with her name and mine side by side. Electricity. That used to make me feel connected, proof that I still mattered. Now it just felt like proof I'd been foolish. I made a list that morning. It wasn't a list of chores or groceries. It was a list of what still belonged to me. My name, my will, my decisions, and maybe, if I worked at it, my peace. I didn't write Lisa's name anywhere on that list. By noon, I had decided something quiet and simple. If she wanted to treat me like I was invisible, then invisible was what I'd become. But on my terms. And here's the funny part. People think revenge has to be loud. They picture yelling, courtroom drama, dramatic exits. But the smartest revenge starts in silence. It starts with someone realizing they're done being the family joke. If you've ever been called crazy by someone who wanted control over it, I mean. Tell me in the comments. What's the moment you realized silence speaks louder than shouting? And hey, if stories about family revenge and redemption speak to you, make sure to subscribe. We've got more real stories that'll make you think what forgiveness really means. The kettle clicked behind me, pulling me out of my thoughts. I poured the water, stirred in the sugar, and sat back down at the table. Outside, the street was quiet. Somewhere a dog barked. I took a sip and smiled, not because I was happy, but because something inside me had finally stopped shaking. The dish sat on the counter, clean and gleaming. I thought about baking again, something sweet, something just for me. The day before, I'd brought dessert to a family that didn't want me there, but next time the invitation would be mine to write. The morning light hit the kitchen table, and I sat there with the same cup of coffee from hours earlier. It had gone cold, but I kept sipping like it still mattered. I pulled the old metal file box from the cabinet, the one labelled important stuff, and set it down in front of me. My hands hesitated for a second. I already knew what I'd find inside. Receipts, tax forms, letters, decades of trying to do things right. Somewhere near the bottom was the envelope I was looking for. It was wrinkled, the ink smudged from years of handling. I opened it carefully, like it could still explode. Inside was a copy of the check I'd written to Lisa years ago. $60,000, my early retirement fund. The note I'd written with it was still attached. No repayment needed, because you're my daughter. I had even drawn a small heart next to my name. I stared at those words until the paper blurred. For the first time, they didn't sound generous. They sounded like a woman trying to buy love she already deserved. The clock ticked loud in the quiet room. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past. I could hear every small sound, like the house was listening too. I looked through the rest of the folder, co-signed loans, birthday cards, her college forms. Every document had my signature. Her life was written in my handwriting. The one thing missing was gratitude. I picked up the phone and almost called her. Old habits die hard. But then I remembered her face yesterday, how she smiled when she called me crazy. The phone went back down. I wasn't going to beg for basic respect. I went to the sink, rinsed my mug, and left it upside down to dry. There's something final about an empty cup. A breeze from the window lifted the corner of that old note. I read it again, quieter this time. The words weren't sweet anymore. They were naive, maybe even pathetic. I wasn't angry at Lisa for taking the money. I was angry at myself for thinking she needed proof that I loved her. The thing about motherhood is you spend years teaching your kids how to walk, talk, think, and then one day they use all of it to walk away from you. I closed the envelope, put it back in the file box, and snapped it shut. The metal made a sharp sound that echoed around the room. I don't know what came over me, but I started cleaning, wiping every counter, every shelf. Maybe I just needed something I could actually fix. I scrubbed until my shoulders hurt, until the smell of lemon cleaner filled the air. The kitchen looked brand new, like it belonged to someone else. Then I saw the photo on the fridge, Lisa at her wedding, holding my hand. She had written, "Thanks, Mom," on the back. That was before the world taught her that saying thank you was optional. I took the photo down. I didn't tear it. I just put it in a drawer. By the time I sat down again, the house felt too clean, too quiet. I took a pen and a sheet of paper from the drawer. I wasn't sure what I was writing at first, but the words came easy, things I've done for others that I can't undo. Under that, I listed them one by one, paid her tuition, signed the mortgage, watched the grandkids every summer, lied for her when she missed payments. The list went on longer than I expected. When I finished, I looked at it and laughed. A short, bitter laugh that didn't sound like me. Then, right under the last line, I wrote, "No more." That single phrase looked small on the page, but it felt heavier than anything I'd written in my life. I folded the paper and slid it into the same envelope with the check copy. My own signature stared back at me. I didn't hate that woman who'd written it. I just didn't recognize her anymore. I stood up and looked around the house. It was filled with proof of a lifetime of doing the right thing. Every piece of furniture, every bill paid on time, every framed memory, evidence of effort no one ever noticed. I didn't need another apology that would never come. What I needed was a plan. Something real. The thought came suddenly, like a gust of cold air. Janet, my neighbour, the one who always said, "Don't let people mistake kindness for weakness." She'd know what to do next. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside. The sun was bright, the kind that makes everything look harsher. As I walked down the driveway, I felt lighter. Not happy, not sad. just lighter. Janet's front porch smelled like coffee and garden soil. She waved from her chair, wearing that same old denim jacket she'd probably had since the 80s. "You look like a woman on a mission," she said. "I think I finally am," I told her. She poured me a cup without asking and nodded toward the seat across from her. "Start talking," she said. I set the envelope on the table between us. "I need to know how to make sure I don't lose anything else." Janet looked at it, then at me. "You can't take back what's gone," she said slowly, "but you can stop giving." It wasn't advice that made me cry. It was the permission. I took a deep breath, the kind that doesn't fill your lungs but steadies your hands. "Then I guess that's what I'm going to do," I said. Janet reached for her phone. "I've got someone you should meet. His name's Tom Evers. He's a lawyer, retired, but still sharp. He helps women protect what's theirs." She scribbled a number on a napkin and pushed it toward me. I folded it and put it in my pocket. The paper felt warm, like it had already been waiting for me. When I walked back home, the air smelled like rain. I didn't rush. The idea of doing something for myself felt strange, almost rebellious. Inside, I placed the envelope on the counter, next to the phone. My hands didn't shake this time. I poured another cup of coffee, the good kind, and let it steam while I watched the sky darken. Somewhere deep down, I knew the next time Lisa called, things wouldn't sound the same. But for once, I wasn't afraid of that. The phone sat silent. I didn't reach for it. I just listened to the soft hum of my own house, the sound of something finally settling into place. The napkin with Tom Evers' phone number was still in my pocket when I stepped into Janet's kitchen the next morning. She was making coffee, the real kind that smelled like patience. The radio hummed quietly under the sound of the percolator. She looked at me the way old friends do, like she already knew why I was there but wouldn't say it first. "Sit," she said, pointing to the stool near the counter. "You look like someone who finally decided she's had enough." I smiled. "I guess that's what this face looks like." Janet poured me a cup without asking how I took it. She already knew. We'd lived on the same street for 25 years through blizzards, blackouts, and every neighborhood garage sale that never sold anything worth the sticker price. She leaned on the counter and studied me. "You found the papers, didn't you?" I nodded. "All of them." She sighed, the kind of sigh that comes from being right too many times. "You gave that girl everything, Nora. Money, trust, time. And what did she give you?" I didn't answer. The silence was enough. Janet reached for a sugar packet and tore it open like she was emphasizing every word. "You can't get that money back, you know. Once it's called a gift, it's gone. That's the law." "I don't want it back," I said quietly. "I just want her to stop treating me like a burden she has to manage." Janet stirred her cup. "Then you have to stop giving her the power to do that." Something about the word power made me sit up straighter. It didn't sound like revenge. It sounded like repair. Janet picked up her phone and started scrolling. "There's a guy I know, a lawyer. He used to handle estates and trusts before he retired. Still does some consulting work for women in your situation. His name's Tom Evers, good man, doesn't talk down to people." She found the number and handed me the phone. "You should call him today," I hesitated. "Won't that make things worse?" "Worse than what?" she asked, eyebrows raised. "Being called crazy by your own daughter?" That shut me up. I dialed the number before I could talk myself out of it. The line rang twice, and a calm male voice answered. "Evers." "Mr. Evers, my name's Nora Whitman," I said. "A friend, Janet Lopez, gave me your number. I think I need some advice about protecting my assets." He paused just long enough to sound thoughtful. "Can you come by tomorrow morning? 10 o'clock? "I can," I said. "Bring your documents," he replied. "And bring your patience. Legal change takes time, but it's worth it." When I hung up, Janet smiled. "See? You already sound stronger." "I sound nervous," I said. "Same thing sometimes," she replied. We sat for a while, sipping coffee, talking about things that weren't about family, the weather, her cat, her latest fight with the HOA about the height of her rose bushes. But beneath it all, I felt something I hadn't in years, a pulse of control returning. When I left, the air outside felt sharp and alive. I walked home slowly, hands in my coat pockets, letting the sound of my shoes on the pavement drown out the leftover noise in my head. Back inside, I opened my file box again. The papers looked less like mistakes now and more like evidence. I sorted them into neat piles. Mine, hers, useless. Each label felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. By late afternoon, I had a folder ready for Tom Evers. Birth certificate, property deed, bank statements, copies of Lisa's emails where she'd promised to take care of everything. I slipped them all inside, sealed it, and wrote in black marker, "Do not ignore." That night, Lisa called. Her name lit up on my phone screen like a warning light. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times, then I picked up. Mom, she said, voice honey-sweet and condescending all at once. "Are you okay? You've been quiet lately." "I'm fine," I said. "I just worry," she continued. "You know, with your memory and everything, maybe I should come by this week. Make sure you don't," I cut in. "I'm not up for visitors." A pause. "Are you mad at me?" "No," I said simply. "Just thinking." She sighed, clearly frustrated that I wasn't following the script she'd written for me. "Okay, well, call me if you need help with bills or the house. Mark can take care of things faster if you let him." "I'll manage," I said. When the call ended, I felt that same lightness again, the one I'd felt walking away from Janet's porch. Not happiness, exactly. More like balance. I made myself a small dinner, sat by the window and watched the sun dip behind the mountains. Somewhere in the neighbourhood, a lawnmower hummed, someone's dog barked at nothing, and a wind chime clinked in soft rhythm. Ordinary sounds, but they didn't sound lonely tonight. Before bed, I took one last look at the folder on the kitchen counter. Tomorrow it would leave my hands and land on Tom Evers' desk. That single thought settled me. I turned off the light, the good kind of tired sinking into my bones. The house was still, but my mind wasn't. It was already rearranging itself, tidying up old memories, making room for something new. When morning came, I'd bring that folder downtown. I didn't know exactly what I was walking into, but for once, that uncertainty felt like progress. The next morning, I pulled on my best pair of slacks, the navy ones that still fit just right, and buttoned up a blouse I hadn't worn since Frank's retirement dinner. It wasn't vanity. It was armour. When you're about to take back your life, you don't do it in sweatpants. The law office sat in an old brick building downtown between a florist and a bakery. It smelled like coffee and paper, the scent of people who still believed in rules. I stepped inside and the receptionist, a young woman with glasses too big for her face, smiled politely. "You must be Mrs. Whitman. Mr. Evers will be right with you." She offered me lemon tea while I waited. I took it, mostly to keep my hands busy. The warmth seeped through the cup, and for the first time in weeks, my fingers didn't shake. The door to the back office opened, and a tall man with silver hair and the kind of posture that says he reads fine print for fun stepped out. "Mrs. Whitman," he greeted. "I'm Tom. Come in." His office was tidy, but lived in. Books lined the walls, old ones with cracked spines, and a plant drooped in the corner like it was reconsidering optimism. He gestured for me to sit. "Janet tells me you're looking to get your affairs in order." I set the folder on his desk. More like taking them back. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that doesn't need teeth to mean respect. "That's a good reason. Let's start simple. What's prompting this?" I looked down at the papers. "My daughter, Lisa, she thinks I've lost it, calls me forgetful, unstable, crazy, if we're being honest." He nodded slowly, not interrupting. "And you're not." "No," I said. "I'm just done." He opened the folder, flipping through the documents with quick precision. "You've been generous," he murmured. "Very. You co-signed a mortgage, gave her a large sum, allowed her access to your accounts." "I thought it was what mothers do," I said. "Sometimes it is," he replied. "And sometimes mothers have to protect themselves from their own children. It's not cruelty, it's clarity." He leaned back in his chair. "Here's what we'll do. First, we revoke any power of attorney she holds. You have one, yes?" I nodded. "From when I fell and broke my hip 3 years ago," she insisted. "Standard. We'll replace it with one that names you as the sole decision-maker with no successor." He made a note on a legal pad. "Next, we'll draft a revocable living trust. That way, your house and assets are under your control while you're alive. When you're gone, they'll go where you choose, not automatically to her." I exhaled, a sound halfway between relief and disbelief. "That's possible?" "It's not just possible. It's smart." He gave a small smile. "You can list a charity, a foundation, even a friend, or no one at all. The point is, it's your name on the title, your signature that matters." He poured himself more tea from a pot on his desk and gestured to the extra cup. "You want more?" I nodded, surprised by how normal it felt. "Thank you." He asked a few more questions: birth date, marital history, bank affiliations, all the things that once felt invasive but now felt like steps toward breathing again. At one point he asked, "Do you want your daughter to know?" The question hung between us. I stared at the stack of documents. "Eventually," I said, "but not yet. I want to make sure she can't undo it first." He nodded. Wise. When people are used to controlling you, they call it betrayal when you stop letting them. That line sat in my chest long after he said it. By the time the paperwork was printed, the lemon tea had gone cold. I signed every page slowly, carefully, like I was carving my name into history. Tom notarized the forms, stapled them neatly, and handed me a copy of each. "There," he said, sliding the folder back toward me. "You're officially the only person who gets to decide what happens to your life." I laughed softly. "Feels strange." "It should," he said. "Freedom always does at first." When I stood to leave, he added, "If you ever want to set up a charitable clause, I can help. You'd be surprised how many people use these trusts to create something lasting." "Actually," I said, "there's a women's shelter on Maple Avenue. I stayed there once, a long time ago. I want them to have the house when I'm gone." He smiled wider this time. "Then that's what we'll make happen." Outside, the sun had shifted behind clouds, but I didn't mind. The grey light felt honest. I walked past the bakery, thought about stopping for something sweet, and then did. A lemon tart, still warm, the crust flaking in my fingers. I ate it right there in my car, the taste sharper and cleaner than I remembered. When I got home, the answering machine light was blinking. One new message. Lisa's voice filled the kitchen. "Mom, Jody said you've been acting weird lately. Are you okay? You didn't answer my text about the credit card bill." "I'm starting to worry." Worry. That was her favourite word when control slipped out of reach. I deleted the message before it finished. Then I sat down, opened my folder again, and read through the trust papers once more. Every line was clear, every choice was mine. The quiet of the house didn't feel heavy this time. It felt deserved. I made myself another cup of tea, no lemon, just plain, and stood by the window as rain started to fall. Each drop hit the glass like punctuation, steady and certain. The world outside hadn't changed, but mine had. The sound of rain hadn't stopped when morning came. It drummed softly against the windows, steady like a metronome. I stood in the kitchen, holding a new key the locksmith had handed me only minutes earlier. The old lock sat on the counter like relics, rusted brass, worn smooth by too many hands that weren't mine. The locksmith, a polite young man named Eric, wiped his boots before stepping in. "Front and back door both?" he asked. "Both," I said. "And make them deadbolts." He nodded without question. "You expecting trouble?" "No," I said. "I'm preventing it." He gave a small smile like he understood more than he said and got to work. The steady click of his tools echoed through the quiet house. It was oddly satisfying, like hearing the sound of my life being resecured, piece by piece. When he was done, he handed me 4 shiny new keys. "All yours," he said. "Nobody else has copies." I paid him, added a tip that made him blink, and walked him to the door. The rain had slowed to a mist. "You stay dry out there," I said. "Always try, ma'am," he replied with a grin before disappearing down the driveway. I stood there a moment, just looking at the closed door. For the first time in years, it felt like mine. Not Lisa's, not Mark's, not anyone else's who thought they had the right to walk in without knocking. Just mine. I made a pot of coffee and poured a cup while I stared at the keys lined up on the table. One for my purse, one for a fireproof box, one for Kay next door because she'd earned my trust long before my own daughter lost it, and one for the safety deposit box at the bank. That's what Tom Evers had told me to do. Always have backups for the things that protect your peace. I labelled each key in neat handwriting, the kind I used to use when I worked at the elementary school, back when names still mattered to people. The house felt different now. Not safer exactly, just quieter in a way that was mine to choose. I spent the rest of the morning cleaning out drawers, pulling out old bills, birthday cards and appliance manuals for things that didn't even exist anymore. Most went into a trash bag. The act of throwing them away didn't hurt, it soothed. Every crumpled paper was a piece of someone else's expectation leaving my space. By noon, I'd filled 2 bags and set them by the curb. The rain had stopped completely. I walked back inside, washed my hands and opened the windows to let in the smell of wet pavement. The phone rang once. I let it. It rang again. Then again. On the 4th, I picked up. "Mom," Lisa's voice came through, clipped and impatient. "You changed the locks. Mark tried to drop off your medication this morning and the key didn't work." "I know," I said evenly. "You know?" she repeated. "Why would you, Mom? This is insane. You're making it impossible for us to help you." "I don't need help," I said. "Yes, you do," she snapped. "You forget things. You left your porch light on for 2 days last week." "I like it on," I replied. "It makes me feel safe." She let out a frustrated sound. "This isn't like you, Mom. You're acting paranoid." I almost laughed. Maybe I am, or maybe I've just learned to lock my own doors. There was a pause, then her voice softened, syrupy sweet. "You know I'm only trying to protect you." "I believe that," I said quietly. "The problem is you don't ask what I need protecting from." "From yourself," she said, her tone sharp again. "You're losing perspective. I mean, who changes their locks without talking to their family first?" "Someone who realised her family stopped knocking," I said. She went silent, the kind of silence that means she's realising I'm not playing the same game anymore. "Fine," she said at last. "If you want to be alone, be alone. Don't call me when something goes wrong." "I won't," I said, "but thank you for the warning." I hung up before she could. The air felt still afterward, heavy but not unpleasant. I poured another cup of coffee, took it to the living room and sat on the couch. The old grandfather clock ticked steadily in the corner, its rhythm patient and unbothered. On the coffee table, I placed my new trust documents. The folder was slim but powerful, more powerful than Lisa would ever realise. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about choosing who got access to my peace. By late afternoon, I went to the bank as Tom had suggested. The branch was quiet, a couple of tellers chatting softly behind the counter. A woman named Trina, young, calm, the kind of person who didn't oversmile, led me into a small glass office. "What can I help you with today, Mrs. Whitman?" she asked. "I'd like to remove an authorised user from all my accounts," I said. "My daughter, Lisa Reed." She looked at her screen, typing quickly. "All right, I see her listed on your checking and savings as co-signer. You want her completely off both?" "Yes," I said. "Completely." "Understood," she said, her tone respectful. "We'll update everything immediately. Do you want new cards issued in your name only?" "I do," I said. She printed the forms, handed me a pen, and I signed each page with a steady hand. When she finished processing, she gave me a small, genuine smile. "You're all set. No one but you can access these accounts now." For a brief second, I wanted to cry. Not because I was sad, but because freedom at 70 felt like a strange miracle. As I stood to leave, Trina added, "You'd be surprised how many women come in here to do the same thing. It's never too late to take your name back." Outside, the sun had come out again. The street glistened, puddles reflecting clean blue sky. I walked slowly to my car, feeling taller somehow. When I got home, the house greeted me like an ally, quiet, still, waiting. I put the new bank folder beside my trust papers, locked them both in the fireproof box and slid it under my bed. Then I brewed tea, stronger than usual, and sat on the porch. Across the street, the world went on, neighbours mowing lawns, kids on bikes, a delivery van pulling up to Kay's house. Everything looked ordinary, only it wasn't. Not anymore. I sipped my tea and looked at the key on the table beside me, shining in the soft light. It wasn't just metal, it was proof. Proof that for the first time in a long time, every door in my life locked and opened because I said so. The sky was the colour of steel when I pulled into the parking lot of First Mutual Credit Union. The air smelled like wet asphalt and change, two things that always show up right before a storm. I sat in the car for a moment, letting the hum of the engine fade. The folder on the passenger seat held everything that mattered now, my trust documents, the new keys, and a list of every account Lisa's name still touched. Inside, the bank was almost too quiet. The faint click of a printer, the distant murmur of a teller greeting a customer, the low hum of fluorescent lights. I approached the counter, and a woman with short curls and warm eyes smiled. Her name tag read Trina, branch manager. "Good morning," she said. "How can I help you today?" "I need to make some changes to my accounts," I told her. "Significant ones." Her smile softened, professional but kind. Of course, let's step into my office. Her office was small but tidy, with a potted fern by the window that looked like it was thriving against all odds. She closed the door behind us and gestured to a chair. Tell me what you'd like to do. I placed the folder on her desk and opened it. I want to remove my daughter, Lisa Reed, from everything. Checking, savings, credit access, online accounts, all of it. Trina adjusted her glasses and began typing. All right, let me pull up your file. The clacking of her keyboard filled the silence. Then she glanced at the screen. It looks like she's listed as an authorized user, co-signer and card holder on 3 accounts. Are you sure you want full removal? Once I process this, she won't have access at all. That's exactly what I want, I said. Trina nodded slowly as if she'd seen this before. Understood. It'll take about 10 minutes to process everything. We'll reissue new cards in your name only and set up new security questions. Would you like to set those now? Yes, I said, and she handed me a small form. The first question asked, what was the name of your first pet? I wrote Luna, the golden retriever I'd had before Lisa was born, the one who'd slept at the foot of my bed through every lonely night of my 20s. The second asked, what city were you born in? I wrote Portland. The third, what is your mother's maiden name? I paused, then wrote Carter. Not because the system needed to know, but because I wanted to see my mother's name again somewhere official. Trina typed in the answers, printed new paperwork, and handed me a pen. I signed each page carefully. My hand was steady. When we finished, she smiled faintly. There, everything is now under your sole control. Just like that, I asked. Just like that, she said. Though you'd be surprised how many people don't realize they can do it. They stay in situations where others make decisions for them, until one day, they decide not to. I looked at her. You sound like you've seen a few of those days. I've lived a few, she said with a small grin. That made me laugh, the kind of short, honest laugh that doesn't hurt. When she printed the confirmation forms, I noticed the timestamp at the bottom, 11:37 a.m. Somehow it felt like a turning point worth remembering. Trina handed me a slim envelope with new cards inside. You'll get your replacements by mail in about a week, she said. Until then, you can use these temporary ones. And just so you know, you're not the first person to come in here to take back their life. You just did it with more grace than most. I thanked her and stood. She walked me to the door, and as I stepped out into the lobby, the fluorescent light felt a little softer. Outside, the air had shifted, the rain had stopped, and sunlight caught in puddles like small mirrors. I stopped by the bakery next door and bought a single roll, still warm from the oven. It wasn't celebration food, but it tasted like one anyway. When I got home, I placed the envelope with my new cards in the same fireproof box as my trust documents. It felt like sealing the last open door behind me. I made lunch, just soup and toast, and sat at the table with my notebook. On the first page, I wrote, Things I've changed that can't be undone. Underneath, I listed 3 items. 1, the locks. 2, the accounts. 3, my mind. The list looked small, but it filled the page. The phone rang again around 2. I didn't have to look to know it was her. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice, slightly annoyed, spilled out through the speaker. Mom, what is going on? Mark says the bank called about the account updates. Are you cutting us off? You can't just do this. It affects both of us. Please call me back. I didn't delete it right away this time. I let it play to the end. Every word an unintentional confession of how much she'd relied on me to fund her control. When it finished, I pressed delete. Then I took the phone cord and unplugged it from the wall. The silence afterward was the cleanest sound I'd heard all week. I sat back down, sipping my tea, watching sunlight stretch across the kitchen floor. The house felt lighter, as though it was exhaling after years of holding its breath. Later that evening, I stepped outside to water the small marigolds I'd planted by the steps last spring. Their petals had survived neglect, bad weather, and a few too many weeds, resilient little things. I stood there with the hose in hand, listening to the soft hiss of water, and thought, this must be what taking your life back feels like. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, quiet proof that you're still capable of growth. The air smelled of wet soil and sunlight. I turned off the hose, set it down, and went back inside. The door clicked shut behind me. One sound, sharp and final. I didn't check the locks again. I didn't need to. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of a car pulling into my driveway. Too early for deliveries, too deliberate to be an accident. Through the window, I saw Lisa's blue SUV parked crooked, the door already open before the engine stopped. She wasn't even pretending this was a casual visit. I didn't rush to answer the knock. I poured myself a cup of coffee first, added a splash of cream, stirred slowly, and took one long sip. Only then did I open the door. Lisa stood there in workout clothes, her hair tied too tightly, her phone in one hand like a weapon. "We need to talk," she said. "I figured that's why you drove here uninvited," I replied, stepping aside just enough for her to enter. She didn't thank me. She stormed in, pacing like someone who rehearsed her anger on the way over. "You changed the locks. You cut off the accounts. The bank called me. Do you realize how humiliating that was? They thought I was committing fraud." "I'm sorry for the confusion," I said, setting my mug on the counter, "but I'm not sorry for the decision." Her jaw tightened. "Mom, what are you doing? You can't just shut me out." "I can," I said calmly, and I did. She blinked like I'd spoken another language. "After everything I've done for you?" I laughed, short and sharp. "Everything you've done for me? Lisa, you've been treating me like a liability for years. You talk about me like I'm some stranger you're obligated to manage." "That's not true," she said quickly, defensive. "It is," I said, not raising my voice. "You called me crazy, Lisa. I heard you. The words were clear. You said, 'Why is she even still alive?'" For the first time, she hesitated. Her face froze, eyes darting away. "That was a joke. God, Mom, you can't take everything so literally." "It wasn't a joke to me," I said. "It was the moment I realized you'd already buried me while I was still standing." Her arms crossed over her chest. "You're being dramatic." "No, I'm being awake." The words hung in the air like smoke. She started pacing again, fingers tapping her phone. "Look, you're obviously upset. You've been lonely since Dad died. I get that. But locking yourself away and cutting off your family isn't healthy." I smiled slightly. "That's funny. You never cared about my health until it affected your wallet." Her nostrils flared. "You're not being fair." "And you haven't been honest," I said. "You wanted control, not connection. You took it piece by piece, my trust, my home, my accounts, and when I stopped handing them over, you called me unstable." She dropped the act then, her voice turning cold. "You can't just undo everything, the power of attorney, the joint account. You signed those willingly." "And I revoked them willingly," I said. Her expression flickered, a brief crack in the confidence she'd always worn around me. "You talked to a lawyer?" "I did." "Who?" I tilted my head. "Why? So you can call him and tell him I'm senile?" She didn't answer, but her silence said enough. I walked to the table and opened the folder that held my trust papers. "This is my new life. You're not part of my finances anymore. You don't make my decisions. You don't hold my keys." She scoffed. "You think this gives you power? It's just paperwork." "Paperwork built your life, Lisa. It paid your mortgage, your bills, your down payment. Paperwork put food on your table and got you through college. And now it's saving me from you." Her face twisted, half anger, half disbelief. "You sound paranoid." "No," I said softly. "I sound free." She slammed her phone onto the counter. "You can't just erase me, Mom. I'm your daughter." "I know," I said. "That's the hardest part." The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was thick like the air before a storm breaks. Then she tried one last tactic, the same one she'd used since she was a teenager. "If you really do this, don't expect us to be there when you need help. Don't expect Mark to fix the house or the kids to visit. You'll be alone." "I've been alone for a long time," I said. "The difference now is, it's by choice." Her mouth opened like she wanted to keep fighting, but nothing came out. She picked up her phone and keys instead. "Fine. Have it your way." As she turned toward the door, I said quietly, "I already do." The door slammed hard enough to rattle a picture frame on the wall. I didn't move to fix it. The crookedness felt right. I finished my coffee, cold now, and rinsed the cup. My reflection in the window looked older but not weaker. There's a strange kind of power in realizing someone's approval was never the same as love. The phone rang again later that day. Mark this time. His number flashed on the screen, and I let it go to voicemail. His voice came through moments later, defensive, measured, practiced. "Nora, this is getting ridiculous. Lisa's upset, and I don't blame her. You're making rash decisions you'll regret. Call me so we can talk like adults." Adults. I almost laughed at that one. I deleted it without listening further. Then I turned off the ringer completely. That evening, I walked out to the backyard. The air smelled like pine and damp earth. I sat on the porch steps and looked at the garden I hadn't touched in months. The soil was dry, the marigolds wilted. I ran my fingers through the dirt. It was still soft underneath. Not dead, just neglected. Sometimes all something needs to live again is the right pair of hands. I stayed there until the sun dipped low and the crickets started up. My body ached, but not the way it used to. It was the ache of effort, not exhaustion. Inside, I washed my hands, locked the door, and turned off every light except one. The house was quiet, but for once, I wasn't afraid of the quiet. It was mine, and it stayed that way. The next morning, the house was still, not the kind of quiet that follows sleep, but the kind that follows decision. I moved through the kitchen slowly, each sound amplified. The creak of the floorboard, the hiss of the kettle, the small click of the cupboard latch. Even the silence felt sharper, like it had been waiting its whole life for me to stop filling it. I made 1 cup of coffee, not 2. I didn't reach for the extra mug out of habit, didn't glance at the phone expecting a call, didn't set out breakfast for anyone but myself. For the first time, the routine didn't feel empty, it felt honest. The clock above the stove ticked louder than usual. I sat down at the table with a notebook and started writing. Nothing fancy, no long diary entry, just a list of things that didn't need to be said out loud anymore. I don't owe anyone an explanation. I'm not broken. Silence is not surrender. My peace isn't up for debate. The list went on until the pen ran dry. I set it aside and just sat there, staring at the steam rising from my coffee. It wasn't loneliness, it was space. Outside, I could hear Kay next door calling for her cat again. Same routine every morning since April. "Vernon! Breakfast time!" The poor cat never came when called, but she still tried. That kind of hope used to annoy me. Now, I understood it. Some habits don't die, they just learn better timing. By late morning, I decided to bake. The air felt too heavy with words I hadn't said, and flour always had a way of making things lighter. I reached for my favourite mixing bowl, the chipped one Frank used to tease me about keeping. "You've got 50 bowls, Nora. Why that one?" he used to ask. Because this one held the most memories, that's why. I sifted flour, cracked eggs, and mashed bananas that had gone soft on purpose. The rhythm of it calmed me. Every step measured, predictable, solid. It wasn't about making something for anyone else. It was about proving I still could. When the bread went into the oven, the kitchen filled with that warm, buttery smell that used to mean comfort. I leaned against the counter and watched the timer tick down, the hum of the oven blending into the sound of my heartbeat. The doorbell rang. Once, then again, sharper. I didn't rush. I opened the door and found Kay on the porch, holding a small container. "Soup," she said. "Lentil, and I think Vernon's finally moved under your deck." I smiled. "Tell him he owes me rent." She laughed and stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "Smells like banana bread in here. You expecting company?" "No," I said. "Just myself." She nodded, the kind of nod that says she didn't need more explanation. "Good. You're the best company there is." We sat at the table, ate soup and talked about small things, the price of gas, the new mail carrier, how the town council was thinking about banning plastic lawn flamingos again. She didn't ask about Lisa, didn't ask about Mark, didn't even mention the locks. Bless her for that. When she left, she took half the loaf of banana bread with her and promised to bring back the container. I didn't need to, but I liked knowing she would. The kitchen was quiet again after she left, but softer this time. I wiped the counter, washed the dishes, and left the radio off. The silence didn't feel like absence anymore. It felt earned. By afternoon, sunlight stretched across the floor in long, warm stripes. I pulled out an old box from under the hall table, the one with family photos I hadn't looked at since Frank's funeral. Dust rose as I opened it. There were pictures of Lisa as a little girl, hair tangled, face covered in chocolate. There were birthday parties, Christmas mornings, graduations. Each photo captured a time before things soured, before money and pride started speaking louder than love. I held one picture longer than the rest. Lisa, age 6, sitting on Frank's shoulders, both of them laughing. I could almost hear her tiny voice saying, "Higher, Daddy! Higher!" For a moment, my chest ached. Not from regret, but from memory. People talk about grief like it ends when someone dies. It doesn't. Sometimes it keeps living, wearing a new face, sitting at your kitchen table long after the person's gone. I put the photo back carefully, closed the box and slid it away. The sun was low when I decided to take a walk. The neighbourhood looked the same as always, lawns trimmed, flags fluttering, sprinklers hissing. But I felt different walking through it. I wasn't the invisible old woman people pitied anymore. I was just a woman walking home with her head high, her steps slow but sure. When I came back, there was a note stuck in my screen door. Lisa's handwriting, quick and sharp. "Mom, this is out of control. You're shutting me out." And everyone's worried. "I don't know what you think you're proving, but you're hurting the family. Please call me." No apology, just accusation dressed as concern. I read it twice, folded it neatly, and slid it into the drawer with the rest of her messages. Let her words sit there like museum pieces, proof of what I survived, not reminders of what I lost. Dinner that night was quiet, just toast and jam, but it tasted good. I ate slowly, without checking the clock. When the dishes were done, I sat by the window with a book I'd never finished. The story didn't matter, the act of reading did. The phone stayed unplugged. The only sound was the ticking of the clock and the faint hum of the refrigerator. For years, that quiet had scared me. Now, it felt like music written just for me. Before going to bed, I wrote one more sentence at the bottom of my morning list. Silence isn't empty. It's full of the things I finally stopped explaining. I placed the notebook beside the kettle, right where I'd see it in the morning. Then I turned off the lights and stood there for a second, listening to the hum of my own house. A sound that, for once, didn't need to be shared with anyone. The smell of rain still lingered the next morning when I woke up, soft and clean like a reset. I brewed my coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the newspaper folded beside my notebook. A small ad circled in red caught my eye. 1-bedroom apartment for rent, ground floor, south-facing windows, washer-dryer included. It was the kind of place people start over in, not hide in. I'd cut it out days ago, maybe just to see if I still had the nerve. But now, looking at it again, something in me shifted. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a memory with a mortgage. I dialed the number at the bottom of the ad. A warm voice answered, "Willowview Apartments, this is Teresa." "Hi, Teresa," I said. "I'm calling about the 1-bedroom unit you listed." "You're in luck," she replied cheerfully. "We've got one left. Unit 1B. It's small but bright. When would you like to see it?" There was no hesitation in my voice when I answered. "Today." The drive across town took 20 minutes, long enough for doubt to whisper, but not long enough for it to win. The complex sat at the edge of a quiet neighbourhood. Red brick buildings with tidy flower beds and white curtains visible through every window. The kind of place where no one expected you to explain yourself. Teresa met me at the door. She was in her 50s, kind eyes, no nonsense. "You must be Nora," she said, shaking my hand. "Come on in. I think you'll like this one." She led me down a short hallway and unlocked a door marked 1B. The hinges creaked, but the light that poured in through the south windows made up for it. The space was small, yes, living room, kitchen, 1-bedroom, but it felt open, like it wasn't holding on to anyone's history. The kitchen counter was laminate, not marble, but it gleamed. The refrigerator hummed softly, steady and dependable. The window above the sink looked out onto a patch of green grass and a single maple tree. It wasn't much, but it was mine the moment I saw it. Teresa was talking about square footage and water pressure, but I wasn't really listening. I was already picturing a kettle by that window, maybe a small plant, maybe even a radio. "So," Teresa said finally, "what do you think?" "I'll take it," I said, her eyebrows lifted. "You don't want to sleep on it?" "I already have," I said. She smiled. "Well, that makes my job easy. We can do the paperwork right now." An hour later, I signed my name on the lease, Nora Whitman, in careful, steady pen strokes. When I slid the deposit check across her desk, I felt something unclench in my chest. Teresa handed me a copy of the agreement and said, "Welcome home." Those 2 words hit harder than she knew. Driving back, I noticed how different the town looked. Same streets, same storefronts, but everything felt lighter, like I'd peeled off a layer I didn't realize I was carrying. At home, I opened the door and stepped inside like a guest. The familiar furniture didn't feel comforting anymore. It felt like obligation. I stood in the middle of the living room and made a decision. This time I wouldn't rush to pack. I'd choose each thing deliberately, only what deserved to come with me. The first thing I boxed up was my sewing kit. It had belonged to my mother, the only inheritance I ever got that came with wisdom attached. Mend what you can, she used to say, and learn when to let fabric go. I opened a new box and labelled it Keep, then another, Donate. By evening, I'd filled half of each. The photo albums went in the Keep box. The fancy china set that Lisa always said was outdated went straight to Donate. Let someone else build memories on those plates. As I worked, the house began to sound different, lighter footsteps, fewer echoes, the kind of quiet that made space instead of swallowing it. When the sun dipped, I made myself dinner. Scrambled eggs, toast, and a glass of water with lemon. Simple, honest. It tasted like forward motion. The doorbell rang just as I was finishing. I froze, expecting Lisa again, but when I looked through the window, it was Kay, holding a small cardboard box. "Found Vernon," she said, grinning. "Turns out he likes your deck more than mine." I laughed and opened the door. "Guess he's already claimed me as his new landlord." She stepped inside, peered around at the half-packed boxes. "You moving?" I nodded. "To an apartment across town." She studied me for a moment, then smiled. "Good, you've earned something new." We shared a piece of leftover banana bread while she told me about her daughter's new job in Denver. When she left, she hugged me a little longer than usual. After she was gone, I walked through each room with a notepad, writing small reminders to myself. Take the blue lamp. Leave the old curtains. Don't second-guess the decision. In Lisa's old room, I opened the closet and found a forgotten box of her things, old trophies, a dried corsage, a photo of her high school graduation. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at it for a long time. Then I closed the lid, taped it shut, and wrote on top in black marker, "Return if asked." That felt fair. The night was quiet when I finally sat on the porch. The sky had cleared, stars scattered across the dark like they'd been waiting to be noticed. I thought about what Teresa had said. Welcome home. Funny how sometimes home is the place you haven't lived in yet. I stayed out there until the air cooled and the porch light flickered. Inside, I turned off the lamps one by one until only the hallway light was left. The house didn't feel sad, just finished. Like a book you finally close without needing to know what happens next. When I went to bed, I didn't dream about Lisa or Frank or even the past. I dreamed of a window facing south and sunlight spilling across a clean floor. The morning light came through the blinds of my new apartment, bright and unapologetic. The walls were bare, except for a single framed photo of the mountains I'd hung the night before. I hadn't realised how much space silence could hold until I'd unpacked only what I needed. No clutter, no noise, no traces of someone else's choices. I made oatmeal and coffee, ate by the south window, and listened to the faint sound of traffic 2 blocks away. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint and clean slate. I just settled in to read the newspaper when a light knock came at the door. Not hurried, not aggressive, just uncertain. When I opened it, my grandson Evan stood there holding a backpack almost bigger than he was. His eyes darted up at me, shy and cautious. "Hi, Grandma," he said softly. My chest tightened. It had been weeks since I'd seen him, long enough for his voice to sound older. "Evan," I said, stepping aside. "What are you doing here? Does your mom know?" He hesitated, biting his lip. "She's at work. I told her I was going to the library." I smiled a little, half amused, half worried. "And instead you came here?" He nodded, clutching his backpack like a shield. "I just wanted to see you. Mom says you're mad at her." I motioned for him to sit on the couch. "I'm not mad," I said. "Just making some space." He looked around the apartment, eyes wide at how empty it was. "It's small," he said honestly. "It's perfect," I replied. "Everything I need fits right here." He unzipped his bag and pulled out a sandwich wrapped in foil. "I made this for you. Peanut butter and jelly. The way you like it." I took it, heart softening. "Thank you, sweetheart. That's very thoughtful." He smiled, relief flickering across his face. "Mom said you don't want to live in the big house anymore. She said you're tired." I set the sandwich down gently. "I'm not tired, Evan. I just needed to live somewhere that feels like mine." He kicked his sneakers against the coffee table. "Mom cries a lot now," he whispered. She says you don't love her anymore. The words stung more than I expected. I reached over and took his hand. Love doesn't disappear, honey. It just changes shape sometimes. I still love your mom. I always will. But loving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt you. He nodded slowly, though I could tell he didn't fully understand. Mom gets mad when I talk about you, he said, but I still wanted to see you. I squeezed his hand gently. I'm glad you did. For a while, we just sat there, the kind of quiet that only exists between people who don't need to fill it. Then he spotted the notebook on my counter. Are you writing something? Just thoughts, I said. Things I want to remember. He got up and walked over, reading the open page aloud. Silence isn't empty. It's full of the things I stopped explaining. He frowned. That sounds sad. It's not, I said, smiling. It's peaceful. He nodded again, pretending to understand, then said, Can I draw in it? Of course. He took a pen and drew a crooked sun in the corner of the page. Underneath it, he wrote in big block letters, Love you, Grandma. That's when I felt the tears, quiet and warm. We ate the sandwich together, splitting it down the middle, and I made him cocoa with the only mug I owned. He talked about school, his soccer team, a science project that didn't work, but almost did. Every story came out fast, like he'd been saving them for me. At one point, he looked up and asked, Are you happy here? I thought about it carefully before answering. Yes, Evan, I am. Happiness isn't always loud. It can look like sunlight on a kitchen floor, or a quiet cup of coffee, or a peanut butter sandwich made by someone who loves you. He smiled wide enough that I could see the small gap between his teeth. I'm going to tell Mom that. Maybe don't, I said gently. Let's keep this our secret visit. He zipped his backpack, stood up and hugged me, quick but tight. I'm glad you're not crazy, he said into my shoulder. I laughed softly. Me too. He pulled away, serious now. Can I come again? Whenever you want, I said. But maybe next time tell your mom you're visiting the library after, he grinned. Okay. I walked him to the door, watched him jog down the path until he turned the corner and disappeared. The hallway felt bigger once he was gone, but not emptier. Back inside, I looked at the page where he'd drawn the sun. His crooked little doodle sat beside my words like punctuation. It didn't make the sentence sad anymore. It made it whole. I poured another cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching the afternoon light spill across the floor. Somewhere in the distance, I heard church bells ring the hour, soft and steady. A breeze came through the cracked window, carrying the faint scent of lilacs from the garden outside. I closed my eyes and breathed it in. Maybe this was what healing looked like, quiet mornings, small visits, and the courage to let love exist without ownership. I didn't need to explain it to anyone. The room, the light, the silence, they already understood. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound when I woke up the next morning. The apartment felt heavier than usual, like the air had thickened overnight. I didn't need to check my phone to know something had shifted. I could feel it in the silence, in the way the hallway seemed to hold its breath. By noon, Kay was at my door. She wasn't carrying soup this time. She was holding a folded newspaper. Her expression told me I wasn't going to like what I saw. You've been on Facebook lately? She asked, stepping in before I answered. I haven't touched that thing in months, I said. Why? She unfolded the paper, smoothed it against my kitchen counter, and pointed to the community section. A photo of Lisa, smiling in that polished, professional way she reserved for public appearances, sat above a column titled Protecting Our Parents When Aging Turns Dangerous. My stomach dropped before I even finished the headline. Kay crossed her arms. She gave an interview, Nora. Says you've been having episodes. That you're refusing help, forgetting things, acting erratic. She's framing it like a cry for awareness, but everyone knows who she's talking about. I read the first few lines, every word landing like a bruise. It's heartbreaking watching a loved one slip into paranoia, Lisa had said. Sometimes the hardest part of caregiving is when your parent no longer recognizes that you're trying to protect them. My hands trembled slightly. She's calling me delusional. Kay's jaw tightened. She's calling you public property. I sank into the chair. The room felt smaller. My own daughter had turned my life into a cautionary tale, and I hadn't even been given a name, just enough breadcrumbs for the whole town to find me. She's clever, I said quietly. She didn't use my name, but everyone will know. They already do, Kay said. I heard it at the grocery store this morning. The cashier asked if you were okay living alone. I almost smacked him with my loaf of rye bread. I couldn't help but laugh, though it came out strained. You'd make a good bodyguard. Damn right, she said. But this isn't funny, Nora. She's trying to paint you as unstable. It's not just gossip, it's strategy. She's building her defense in case you push her out completely. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The cracks in the plaster looked like veins, spreading quietly but steadily. You think she's worried I'll expose her? Kay nodded. She's not just worried. She's scared. You took away her control. People like that don't forgive. They retaliate. I stayed silent for a while, listening to the faint hum of the world outside, the sound of a lawnmower, a dog barking, a child laughing somewhere far away. Life went on, as it always did, oblivious to the small wars being fought in kitchens like mine. Kay put a hand on my shoulder. You want me to say something? I can call her, set her straight. No, I said. That's what she wants, for me to react, to prove her point. I folded the newspaper and slid it into the drawer beneath the sink, out of sight, not out of mind. That afternoon, I took a walk to the grocery store. It was a small place, locals, regulars, everyone knowing everyone's business. The kind of store where you can feel eyes on you even before the automatic doors slide open. Morning, Mrs. Whitman, said the cashier, the same one Kay had mentioned. His tone was overly kind, the way people speak to someone they think might break. I smiled back. Morning, Tom. How's your mother doing? He blinked, surprised I remembered. She's good. Still gardening every day. Good, I said, placing my basket on the counter. Tell her I said hi, and tell her I'm perfectly capable of choosing my own fruit in case she was wondering. His cheeks flushed pink. Yes, ma'am. The older woman behind me whispered something to her friend. I didn't catch the words, but I didn't need to. I could feel the shape of them in the air. Poor thing. Such a shame. Used to be so sharp. I didn't hurry. I paid for my groceries, took my receipt, and left with my head high. Back home, I set the groceries on the counter and pulled out my notebook again. On a clean page, I wrote, They can say whatever they want. I don't need to defend myself to anyone who doesn't live inside my truth. I underlined it twice. Around 6, the phone rang. I let it go to voicemail, but the machine picked up and played Lisa's voice into the room. Mom, I heard you've been talking to people about me. Please stop making this harder than it has to be. You need help, and I'm trying to make sure you get it before something bad happens. Don't make me take legal steps. Her tone wasn't angry. It was cold, rehearsed, lawyer-approved. I deleted the message, then unplugged the phone again. That night, I sat by the window, lights off, watching headlights drift across the parking lot. I wasn't hiding. I was letting the noise pass without opening the door to it. The world can be cruel to women who outgrow their silence. It calls them unstable, emotional, ungrateful. I'd seen it happen to others. I just never thought it would happen to me, from my own daughter. Kay texted me later that evening, Don't let her get in your head. The truth always comes out, even when people try to bury it. I smiled at the screen before setting it down. Kay had a way of saying things that made the chaos make sense again. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. The smell of rain drifted through the window, mixing with the faint scent of banana bread I'd baked earlier. It was funny. Storms used to scare me. Now I found them comforting. They never pretended to be anything other than what they were. I poured myself a cup of tea and stood by the window, watching the first drops splatter against the glass. The world whispered about me tonight, but it didn't matter. Tomorrow, the whispers would move on to someone else, and I'd still be here, quiet, steady and unbroken. Rain poured for 3 straight days after the newspaper story. I barely went outside, though I didn't feel trapped. The world could spin with its gossip and noise. I had my quiet, my trust and my freedom. On the 4th morning, the sky finally cleared, thin sunlight breaking through clouds like an apology. That's when I decided to make the next change. I called Tom Evers. He answered on the 2nd ring, his voice calm as ever. Mrs. Whitman, I was wondering when I'd hear from you. I've been thinking, I said. Remember how you mentioned people use their trust to leave something meaningful behind? Of course, he said. Did you have something in mind? Yes. There's a women's shelter on Maple Avenue, Haven House. I want them to have everything. My home, what's left in savings, whatever's mine. I want it written into the trust." There was a pause. "That's a beautiful choice," he said softly. "You know, most people wait until they're gone to do something like that." "I've wasted enough time waiting," I said. He chuckled. "Then let's get started." That afternoon, I drove downtown to his office. The drive felt different this time. Not nervous, not cautious. It felt like purpose. The roads shimmered with puddles, and sunlight flashed through the trees like the world was blinking awake again. Tom had everything ready when I arrived. "We'll amend your trust," he explained, sliding papers across the desk. "This gives Haven House the right to receive your assets upon your passing. You'll maintain full control while you're alive. Complete autonomy. No one can challenge this, not even family." "That's all I needed to hear," I said, picking up the pen. He watched me sign, his gaze steady but kind. "You're building something that will outlast the noise around you. That's real power." When we finished, he said, "Would you like me to inform Haven House on your behalf?" "No," I said. "I'll do it myself." The drive to Maple Avenue took 15 minutes. Haven House sat between an old church and a half-vacant strip mall. The sign was simple, the paint peeling at the edges, but there were flowers by the door, fresh ones. Someone cared enough to keep them alive. Inside, the air smelled like detergent and hope. A woman at the front desk looked up with a tired but genuine smile. "Hi there," she said. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for the director," I said. "Is she available?" "That's me," she replied, standing and offering her hand. "I'm Claire." Her handshake was firm, her eyes clear, the kind of woman who'd seen too much and decided to do something about it. "I'm Nora Whitman," I said. "I'd like to talk to you about your work here." We sat in her small office. The walls were lined with photos of women and children, some smiling, some not, but all alive, which felt like victory enough. She told me about how the shelter started 15 years ago, about the families they housed, the counselling they offered, the struggle to keep donations coming. "It's not glamorous," she said, "but it matters." I nodded. "I know. That's why I'm here." Her brow furrowed slightly. "You're not in trouble, are you?" I smiled. "No, not anymore." Then I explained what I'd done. The trust, the property, the plans. I told her I wanted my home to become a second location, a place for older women starting over. Women who'd been discarded by their families or called crazy for daring to take their lives back. She leaned back in her chair, eyes wide. "You're serious?" "Completely." For a moment she didn't speak. Then she said quietly, "You have no idea what this means. The waiting list for housing is endless. Some of these women sleep in their cars for months." "Then they won't have to anymore," I said. Claire wiped the corner of her eye before laughing softly. "You just walked in here and changed 100 lives before lunch. That doesn't happen every day." "I don't have 100 years left," I said, smiling. "I might as well make the ones I do count." She reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. "Thank you, really." When I left, she followed me to the door. "If you ever want to visit, you're welcome anytime," she said. "I think I will," I replied. Outside, the air smelled of rain and pavement. I looked up at the sign, Haven House, and felt something inside me settle. The world could twist my story however it wanted. I'd already written the ending. That night, back at the apartment, I opened my notebook again. On a fresh page I wrote, "I didn't lose a family, I built a legacy." The next morning, I woke to a voicemail from Tom. "Just confirming that everything has been filed and notarized," he said. "It's official. Haven House is listed as your sole beneficiary. Congratulations, Nora. You did something extraordinary." I played it twice, not because I needed to hear it again, but because it sounded like peace. Later that day, Kay came over with 2 mugs of coffee and a grin that could melt brick. "I heard what you did," she said. "The girl at the diner was talking about it. Guess the shelter posted something online, thanking an anonymous donor for making a transformative contribution." I laughed. "Anonymous, huh?" She raised an eyebrow. "That won't last long. Small towns have big mouths." "I don't mind," I said. "Let them talk about something good for once." Kay sipped her coffee. "You're turning your story into something untouchable. That's revenge the right way." "It's not revenge," I said. "It's closure with better paperwork." She laughed so hard she almost spilled her drink. When she left, I stood by the window, watching the light move across the floor. The apartment was still quiet. But it wasn't the silence of solitude anymore. It was the sound of a new kind of life beginning, one that didn't need approval or permission. The south window glowed warm with the afternoon sun, and I thought of the women who'd sleep under my old roof someday, safe and unafraid. Maybe one of them would sit by the same window I once did, drinking coffee, realizing she wasn't crazy, just finally free. The knock came on a Thursday afternoon, the kind of quiet day that usually passed without notice. I was folding laundry by the south window, the same one that caught sunlight like a promise, when I heard it. 3 sharp raps, too familiar to mistake for a delivery. When I opened the door, Lisa was standing there. She looked smaller somehow. Her hair, once perfectly styled, hung limp and unwashed. The sharp lines of her confidence had softened into something else, something closer to defeat. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice low. I didn't answer right away. I simply stepped aside. She took it as permission and walked in. The air changed as soon as she entered, like the temperature dropped a few degrees. She glanced around the apartment, her eyes darting between the small couch, the tidy kitchen, the single plant on the windowsill. "So this is where you've been hiding?" "I wasn't hiding," I said calmly. "I was living." She gave a short, bitter laugh. "You call this living?" I folded the dish towel in my hands. "I call it peace." For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. She walked over to the table, tracing her finger along its surface as if searching for something to criticize. But there was nothing left for her to rearrange, nothing for her to control. "I didn't come here to fight," she said finally. "Then why did you come?" Her eyes flicked up at me, red-rimmed but still proud. "We lost the house." The words landed softly but carried weight. "What do you mean?" She sat down, exhaling hard. "Mark's business went under last month. The investors pulled out, and now the bank's foreclosing. We're broke, Mom, completely. We had to move into a rental." I didn't move closer, didn't rush to comfort her. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. She frowned. "That's it? You're sorry?" "What do you want me to say?" I asked quietly. "That I'll fix it for you?" Her eyes flashed. "You could if you wanted to. You have money. You had a house. You didn't have to do this trust thing, give it all away to strangers." "Not strangers," I corrected. "Women who needed it more than you ever did." She leaned back, shaking her head. "You've really gone off the deep end." I smiled faintly. "Funny. That's what you said before I got sane enough to stop funding your life." The silence that followed was sharp, but this time I didn't fill it. She did. "Mark left," she said suddenly, her voice cracking just slightly. "He couldn't handle it. Said I ruined everything. Took the car, took what little we had left." I sat down across from her. "And now you're here." She nodded slowly. I didn't know where else to go. There was something almost childlike in the way she said it. For a brief, painful second, I saw the little girl she used to be, the one who used to crawl into my lap after a bad dream, the one who trusted me to make the world safe again. I took a breath. "Lisa, I'm not your safety net anymore. I can offer you a chair, some tea, maybe a quiet place to rest for a bit, but I won't undo the boundaries I've built." Her chin trembled. "I'm not asking for money." "Then what are you asking for?" She hesitated. "Forgiveness." That word hung between us, fragile and heavy. "Forgiveness isn't a transaction," I said softly. "It's not something you earn by saying you're sorry once. It's what grows when both people stop pretending." She wiped at her eyes. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom. I just thought I was helping. I really did." "You thought helping meant control," I said. "You thought love meant possession. And when I stopped playing along, you called me crazy." "I was scared," she whispered. "I thought you'd lose everything." I didn't realize I was the one taking it. For the first time, her voice cracked completely. The tears came then, not dramatic, not loud, just quiet, tired grief. I stood and poured her a glass of water, setting it in front of her. She stared at it for a long moment before taking a sip. "You've changed," she said finally. "I had to," I replied. "You taught me that." She gave a small broken laugh. "Guess I'm good for something." "You always were," I said. "You just forgot who you were supposed to be good for." She looked around the apartment again, softer this time. "It's nice here," she said. "Simple." "That's the point." Her hands fidgeted with the rim of her glass. "What happens to me now?" I thought for a moment. "You start over, like I did." "Where?" "There's a place on Maple Avenue," I said. "Haven House. They help women rebuild. You could volunteer there, maybe work, maybe learn something about the kind of strength that doesn't come from control. Her brow furrowed. You mean the place you gave everything to? Yes, she let out a shaky breath. That's poetic, I guess. Cleaning up at the shelter my mother built after cutting me off. It's not punishment, I said. It's an invitation. For a moment she looked like she might argue. Then her shoulders dropped. All right, she said softly. I'll go. We sat in silence for a while, the light shifting across the floor as afternoon turned to evening. The world outside carried on, cars passing, birds calling, life moving forward whether we were ready or not. When she finally stood to leave, she hesitated at the door. Mom, she said quietly, do you still think I'm crazy? I met her eyes. No, Lisa. I think you're human. She nodded once, then walked out. The door closed gently behind her. I stood there for a long time, staring at the spot where she'd been. My heart didn't hurt the way it used to, it just felt steady. The kettle whistled softly from the stove. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the south window. Outside, the sun dipped low, spilling gold across the street. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I'd lost a daughter. I felt like I'd found my own peace and left the door open just wide enough for her to walk through it someday, on her own terms. The morning light came in soft through the south window, painting the table in gold. I sat with my coffee and watched the steam rise steady and quiet, like it understood patience better than I ever did. My apartment smelled faintly of lemon and baked bread, two things that made any day feel like it had already gone right. It had been a few months since Lisa's visit. She hadn't called, but I'd heard from Claire at Haven House that she'd shown up, first as a volunteer, then as someone who stayed late helping clean. She doesn't talk much, Claire had said, but when she does, it's honest. That was enough for me. The world around me had settled into a rhythm I didn't know I needed. Kay still knocked every Sunday afternoon with something new to complain about. The price of milk, the mayor's haircut, her neighbour's wind chimes that sounded like bad decisions. I listened, nodded, and always poured her tea. Ruby came every Thursday after school, sometimes with cookies, sometimes with her sketchbook. She was growing taller, her laugh louder, her questions sharper. Once she asked, "Grandma, do you ever think about going back?" I looked at her over the rim of my mug. "Back where?" "To the old house," she said. "To see it. To make peace." I smiled. "Peace doesn't live in houses, sweetheart. It lives in the people brave enough to build it somewhere new." She thought about that for a long time before nodding. "Then you built a good one." The quiet between us that day wasn't heavy. It was the kind that feels full, like something blooming, not fading. A few weeks later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. The return address read Whitman and Reed Law Offices. I nearly laughed at the irony before opening it. Inside was a single sheet, no threats, no guilt, just a statement confirming that all legal matters regarding the Whitman family estate were settled, finalised, irrevocable. The word finalised sat like punctuation to a story that had once swallowed my life. I didn't frame it or save it in a folder. I folded it twice and used it as a bookmark in the novel I'd been reading for months. There was freedom in not making shrines to pain. Later that afternoon, I walked to the park near my apartment. The air was warm, carrying that early spring scent of earth and possibility. A group of children were playing soccer in the grass, their laughter carried across the field, light and wild. I found an empty bench and sat, my hands resting in my lap. I used to think revenge meant striking back, loudly, decisively. But it turned out the quiet kind was stronger, the kind where you live better, sleep easier, and stop asking people who hurt you to be the ones who heal you. Across the park, a woman my age was helping a little boy tie his shoe. She smiled at him the way I used to smile at Mark when he was small, back when life was simple, when love didn't come with contracts or conditions. Watching them didn't make me sad anymore. It reminded me that tenderness wasn't gone, it had just changed address. When I got home, there was a message on my answering machine. Lisa's voice again, but softer this time. "Mom, I just wanted to let you know I got hired." At Haven House, they said they're starting a program for women rebuilding after financial loss. I'm going to help manage it. Claire says she hopes you'll come by when it opens. Ruby does too. There was a pause before she added, "Thank you for not closing the door all the way." I sat listening to her voice fade out, the machine clicking off after a few seconds of silence. I didn't replay it. I didn't need to. Some things are better heard once and kept in the heart rather than in the hardware. That weekend, I decided to visit Haven House. I brought a basket of muffins and the smallest potted plant I could find, a marigold, bright and alive. Claire greeted me at the door with a hug that nearly knocked the air out of me. "Nora," she said, "you've started a movement without even trying. You need to see what you built." The building was cleaner, brighter than before. Fresh paint, new furniture, the smell of hope thicker than the smell of bleach. Women were sitting in a circle near the window, talking, laughing, some with tears drying on their cheeks. Among them, I saw Lisa, head down, hands folded, listening, really listening. She didn't see me, and I didn't interrupt. I just stood there for a moment, long enough to recognize that healing had its own pace. Claire leaned close. "You should be proud." "I am," I said quietly, "just not in the way I used to be." When I left, I didn't say goodbye. I didn't need to. The goodbye had already happened years ago, replaced now with something better. Acceptance, maybe even grace. That night, I sat on my balcony as the sun went down. The air carried a chill, but it didn't bite. Below me, someone's radio played faint jazz, the kind with no lyrics, just brass and breath. I liked that. Words sometimes got in the way of truth. I thought about the first time I'd stood behind that wooden gate, overhearing my daughter's laughter, the cruelty laced in it. I remembered the cobbler dish, the silence, the decision that followed. Every step after that, every document signed, every door locked, every boundary drawn, had led me here. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even triumphant. I was free. When the last bit of sunlight slipped below the horizon, I went inside and opened my journal, its final page blank, waiting. I picked up my pen and wrote slowly, carefully, letting every word find its place. They asked why I was still alive. Now I can answer. To remember my name, to set my own table, to keep the door open just wide enough for those who knock with clean hands. I closed the notebook and placed it on the windowsill next to the marigold. Its petals were starting to open wider, facing the last light of the day. The kettle clicked off behind me. I poured one final cup of tea, no sugar, no milk. Just warmth, steady and earned. The world outside hummed, unaware of the quiet victory inside my small apartment. It didn't need to know. The peace was mine, and that was enough. The next morning came without hurry, soft and ordinary, the way good endings always do. I sat by the window with my coffee, watching light spill across the marigold. The world outside kept moving, cars passing, birds calling, neighbours starting their day. Mine had already begun long before that, on the day I decided silence wasn't surrender and kindness wasn't weakness. I'd learned that revenge doesn't always wear anger. Sometimes it looks like peace or a quiet apartment filled with sunlight and the sound of your own laughter coming back. The loudest justice is the kind that doesn't need to shout. It simply lives better. If stories like this one speak to you about strength, healing, and the quiet power that rises when family breaks and rebuilds, then stay here with us. Subscribe and don't miss the next chapter of our family revenge stories and real family drama that remind us the best revenge is never cruelty. It's finally living on your own terms.